Yeah, it was I think I said before, I was quite interested to see just what would fall out my mouth.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wilderness of Creativity. Today I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to a very good friend of mine, Amy Blakeman. Have you ever stopped to think about how much our hormones all play crucial roles in our health and creativity? Amy became a certified menstrual cycle coach in 2021, igniting her mission to help women reframe how they perceive their menstrual cycles. In this episode, we talk about Amy's journey into coaching and discuss critical topics such as PMS, emotional well-being, and how tracking your cycle can empower you to plan your life and creative projects more effectively. Because let's face it, understanding our bodies can lead to greater creativity and fulfillment.
To be a menstruation coach, I've got my social media page,
which is growing.
The great thing about the course, the menstruation course that I did, was not only did it teach me the in-depth knowledge about cycles and to coach people through cycles, I actually was able, one of the modules was putting together your own program and getting some feedback on, and then coaching people on that as well.
Okay.
I listened to a really interesting podcast by Coach Pony. Yeah, she's got this whole sort of, not franchise, but whole Coach Pony business now. She does blogs and webinars, and a lot of it was like, how you build your business without social media.
Well, I mean, it's like, how did we cope without social media building businesses?
Yeah.
Social media is a massive part of that now, I think.
Yeah, it's huge, in terms of the number of clicks, number of followers, your audience reach is so much more possible and global than we previously would have had. Everyone's like really interested in what you're doing, Amy, and I'm like, do you have PMT that you want to sort? No, okay, fine. Get out my face. I'm not interested.
I'm really loving what you're doing. Yes, and
yeah, no one else is doing it.
Day 27, Amy. Day 27.
Calm down, Amy. You'll feel very different on day 4. You'll just be like, oh, thanks. Yeah, I love what I do. I just do it for the love. I don't need the money. But in all seriousness, I've got my page. I haven't got a website yet, but I've got a shop window, so to speak. I've got a product, and I was like, well, I'm lead generating now. And then I listened to this really interesting podcast about growing your business without social media. And basically it was looking at things like going back to kind of basics, or going back to more traditional ways like networking, guest speaking at other people's events, joining other people's podcasts, which I just listened to it after I'd done my recording with you in August, and I was like, I'm already doing it. Fucking amazing.
I'm grateful for 10 likes. I'm grateful for just people engaging in my posts and getting into conversations with me about the podcast and stuff. So it must be really encouraging to see that things are moving in the right direction, because I think what people don't see is the hard work that goes into everything that you're doing forward facing. There's a lot that goes on in the background. Do you want to tell the listeners like your journey up until this point? So what motivated you to become a menstrual cycle coach in the first place?
I got into it purely because of my own experience and trouble with PMS. I didn't struggle so much with the physical symptoms because I've always done a lot of exercise, so I think that's gone in my favour, that I never had significant cramping and pain, but I did struggle really from an emotional side with PMS and feeling like very out of control, quite alarmed sometimes about how intense my moods were and my level of irritability. I didn't like myself. I felt like at its worst, I was like, there was days where I felt possessed. Like that the rage was just off the scale. And I'm thinking, well, but I'm healthy and I do exercise, and I just got this view that You just have to put up with it.
Is there something specific within our hormonal makeup that makes that more obvious?
Yeah, and
Is there?
I'll be honest, some studies are still trying to work out fully what it is, but what they've kind of narrowed it down to is that some women more than others will seem to have a more sensitivity to the change in the hormones that fluctuate between estrogen playing its part and then progesterone kicking in the latter part of your cycle. So sometimes that fluctuation,
Interesting.
some women might feel a bit more intensely than other women. There's also links with neurodiversity. So there's stuff to suggest that potentially you might have more enhanced PMS symptoms if you are ADHD. And then there's a more serious version, for want of a better word, of PMS, PMDD, premenstrual dysphoria disorder. And that is PMS on an intense scale. And one of the identifiers of that is that moods are so severe that it has an impact on your ability to function at that point before your period. So some women will feel significantly depressed, potentially perhaps even suicidal, but the minute their period arrives, it's gone. So yeah, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, it really can vary from woman to woman. That sounds like an album.
From woman to woman. This was just ping-ponging in my brain just a moment ago. I'm wondering if you are a creative that you might experience heightened PMS symptoms, only in the sense that you mentioned a sensitivity.
Yeah, now that's a really interesting point because I, again, not diagnosed, but read all these studies about high empaths or high sensitivity. Personally, for me, from what I've read, and I'm kind of on that high empath scale. I'm very sensitive. I personally believe there's a potential correlation there, and how you manage yourself just day to day at certain points in your cycle around knowing where you're at and what's going on for you in your own body from a physical perspective, emotional perspective, a cognitive perspective, that you try and understand and learn and recognize what your strengths are, and how you then align with your capabilities at that particular moment, and where you forgive yourself in the moments where, if we're to go on to the creativity point, I don't know, you got writer's block, or that's you putting yourself under pressure to create something, to have something on paper or piece of movement, or a scene or something that you've got to create. I think sometimes they can just be that block because of feeling under pressure to do it. I don't think anything really comes to you creatively under cognitive stress like that. I think that goes hand in hand.
And is there something about creative flow?
Yeah. And that in the earlier part of your cycle, so just after your period, where estrogen has started to rise, that's the good mood hormone. That plays a wonderful sort of dance with the serotonin. Everything just flows a lot better. Like everything, it just looks, feels better. You are typically more creative. Our language is better. Like we are more communicative. We're able to hold those conversations. Like tonight, I've a couple of times I've struggled to get my words out. I'm on day 27, and it's recognizing I get stuck. I literally go, oh, what's that word? Or I stumble over my words. It's like clunky, and it just hits differently. 2 weeks time, liquid
Yeah.
liquid conversation. Like it just, like you were saying about it takes a little bit longer to write that email or reach out, and it's like you're in the latter half of your cycle, your energy is more inward. In the earlier part of your cycle, your energy is more outward. You want to reach out. There's more of that innate desire to connect, make connections, create, make something happen. all that stuff. And then the latter half of your cycle, if you think from a primitive perspective, your body's aiming for pregnancy. This is the latter part. It's nesting. It's time for inward. It's time for rest. So when you start thinking like, oh, I must reach out to that person, it's because really you don't want to reach out to that person.
When you are growing a business, or when you are procuring, whatever the word is. It's going to be really interesting. I might just have to put some of these in as bloopers. Don't worry, I'll edit it so we sound really articulate. But like when you're like you're networking, when you've done all of that sort of stuff, and then knowing when to pull back a little bit, and then not schedule any meetings, not kind of overdo it, because actually that time is maybe where you do a little bit more reflection. Is that kind of like the planning stage then?
It can be. It can be. It's certainly what works for me as well. And again, sometimes in your cycles things will vary a little bit, but typically it's the admin stuff, it's the wrapping up, it's getting stuff done, tidied up, off your desk type thing. Toning stuff down in the diary, thinking about how you socialize in a different way. So it doesn't necessarily mean I'm not doing anything for the week before my period. It could be just, because there's still real life and you still really want to see people. But it hits
and you still have to go to work.
And you still have to go to work and talk to people, and that's just hell sometimes. But it's that thing of, it's zingy for me. Like I'm, when I'm at work in the earlier part of my cycle, I'm like, get me in a meeting, get me in front of a room of people. I'll run a training program. I just want to have meetings and talk to people. This part of my cycle, I'm like, right, I just need to send that email, like just write up what I've done, and reflection. And then your intuition is heightened during your period. There's a phrase that's in this sort of cyclical world called, I'm going to bleed on it. Let me just bleed on it. Amazing. I still haven't quite got the courage to say it in the workplace.
Can you imagine?
I'll just bleed on it and come back to you next week. I don't think the construction industry, all male dominated environment, is ready for my story starting with bleeds. But saying that, I have openly said about my period at work, and the men have taken it really well, by the way, but I'll come back to that. But yeah, it's that the intuition piece around, sometimes it's thinking about, what comes up for you when you're on your period. If you were to sit and reflect, what's gone well, what hasn't gone so well, what's that difficult conversation you've got to have, what's something you've really got to crack that you really don't want to do, or it's really difficult. And then as you continue through your bleed and things start to get lighter and you start feeling lighter, and I personally do, and you feel like you're coming back to life, you're coming into your spring, and that's when the planning feels a bit easier. Like looking forward, what is it you want to achieve, or what do you need to get done, like with your family, with your little boy, what's that going to look like over the next couple of weeks. Sometimes I can be guilty of planning too much when I'm in my ovulation phase, and then my luteal phase is absolutely hating my ovulation side, because I'm like, whoa, like it was the other week and I just thought, I've totally misjudged this. When you're really doing well, your masculine energy is like doing, it's active, it's goal orientated, it's get stuff done and you're out there. And then there's also your feminine energy, which is more slow and soft, and there's flow, and it's not about doing, it's about reflecting, it's sitting, it's rest, and it's getting that balance that when you feel good, you're like, yeah, let's do that, yeah, let's go to this gig, yeah, let's do that. And then a week or two later, you're like, oh, I went to a gig last night and now I'm out with a group of friends. And sometimes it's that thing of, it's not necessarily that you don't want to go, but you're just like, I'm going to show up differently tonight. And how can I show up in a way that
is authentic?
Authentic. It's a really interesting point. I remember talking to a friend. She was like, "Oh, do you fancy meeting up in the next couple of days?" And I said, "Look, I'm going to be really frank with you. I'm on my period, and I'm going to rest, actually." And I said, and actually, it will benefit both of us, because the fact I'm being honest with you, rather than going, yeah, let's meet up, you're not going to get the best version of me, and that's going to be a waste of your time. Why don't we wait for let's meet up next Friday? And it doesn't necessarily have to be around your period. It's actually setting boundaries, full stop.
I am becoming much more aware of my boundaries. I don't think I had any boundaries when I was growing up. I didn't know how to set them for myself. It wasn't modelled to me, or certainly I wasn't aware of those things being modelled to me when I was growing up. So I am only just starting to recognise what I need and when. When we chatted last time, we talked about the education around the menstrual cycle, and how you feel that actually what we should be doing is changing the narrative and empowering young people to track their cycle, to have that ownership over it.
Absolutely, because the societal narrative is still there that PMS is just something you got to put up with, or anything else more severe in terms of our pain is diminished. It's not really a problem, or take some paracetamol, or go on birth control. And it's like, yeah, there's a bit more to this. And so I've grown up with the narrative of you just have to put up with it, but you won't always feel like that. I was sort of thought, oh, well, I'm sort of good 2 weeks in 4. I've said that to people, and I'm like, oh, well, you kind of gaslighted yourself.
But it does make you think, oh, I'm just going to keep it to myself then. I'm just going to suffer in silence.
With my history and with the PMS, mine was really the mood changes and the emotions and the intensity of it. And I knew those really difficult days were coming, it would be one particular day. And I sort of, now I know I'm sensitive to the fluctuations in hormones around ovulation more than actually most of the rest of my cycle. And when I knew that day was here, I would just be like, I'll just keep to myself. And I'd have to say to myself, don't speak to anyone, Amy. Keep it quiet. Say hello at the most. Just walk away, because this isn't the day. And I'm at work trying to function, and I'm like, but actually what I really want to do is rip into everybody, like verbally just rip them to shreds. And I hated that.
You're not that. Do you know what I mean? So it does feel alien.
Yeah.
And you start thinking,
I'm vile. And that, I was quite, I've got quite a good level of esteem, and I can comfortably say that without feeling like I'm hurting myself. I can be quite honest about that. But I was like, I was vile in relationships and friendships. Have been like, sometimes like, wow, Amy, like, where did that come from? And I would feel awful, because I knew it was awful in the moment, but the intensity, I couldn't stop it. I was like, this needs to come out. So it was when I had a 360 health assessment a fair few years ago, and it was paid through work. It was a great benefit, and I went and had the female test, everything. She said, oh, is there anything particularly concerning you? And I just sort of said, well, my PMS, like the emotional symptoms. Physically, I'm generally okay, but it's the emotions that up and down and I really don't want to be offered birth control or antidepressants, which have been my options before. I've been on birth control and I felt it deadened me, like I just felt flatlined.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't myself. And then she mentioned about sportswomen who, coach in line with their cycle. And she sort of gave me a sort of a flicker of hope then. So then I went home and fell down a massive Google scroll hole. Before I know it, 2 hours later, I'm like managing your cycle naturally, foods and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, wow. And I'm a visual person, visual learner, and all that. And the seasons of the cycle I really liked.
Yeah, so talk us through that.
So you've got winter, so that's your bleed. So that's inward, that's downward time. It's warming foods, it's rest, it's your inward. Then you go into your spring. Estrogen levels are rising, so your ovaries are producing estrogen with a view to then produce or create and release an egg. Summer, that's then ovulation, so that's your fertile window for 12 to 48 hours maximum. And then your luteal phase is your autumn, so from ovulation in the lead up to your period. And I found that, seasons of your cycle are really helpful visual for me to think about where there's brighter days, where there's more quieter days, where it's more restful, where I don't know, it was just
it made sense.
Helped. It made sense to me. So I started keeping that in mind, and then I started thinking about how does this help me at work? And then I was learning to coach at the time, and then I was like, what's my niche going to be? And knowing the impact it had on me, just trying to live a bit more sort of cyclically.
Yeah.
I was like, surely there's menstruation coaches out there. Like, is this something I'm just making up in my head, or and then I found this course, this accreditation, and I literally looked at the syllabus and I was like, yes, that's exactly everything I need. Because I'd coached, after I became a coach, I coached women on their cycles.
What, it just happened naturally?
Yeah, and I said, I was coaching this because I was interested in women's health and then talking about the cycles. And then it really dawned on me that, well, I only know my cycle. I don't know how I would read, understand, support someone and their cycle from a coaching session. So it really highlighted a gap where I was like, oh, you don't feel the same as me? Right. Okay, this is interesting. I know mine really well, so then thankfully I found this accreditation, and then it's given me all the tools to, well, I've learned about menstrual cycles on a whole other level anyway, on a really deep level, emotionally, behaviorally, from a digestion perspective, from a cognitive perspective, how to spot patterns, and then work with women or anyone that bleeds and has a cycle that I'm open to having a conversation where they struggle, but I get their cycle, I have a look at their tracker, I look at it beforehand, and then we go into the coaching session with a sort of a topic in mind. But the first part, the good part chunk of the session is what's come up for you, what have you noticed about your cycle, what patterns are coming up for you, what are your challenges, what's been particularly good, and I can pick out things I can see happening but from one cycle to another. And it's not instant. It's not like 1 month of this. It can take sort of 3 cycles really for good practices that you're putting in or lifestyle changes in to see the benefits of the cycle.
We've briefly touched upon when we might be more creative. So it's during the ovulation window, isn't it?
So follicular, so that's your spring up until ovulation, just slightly after. Usually around then, when you're more outward, you're more outgoing, the serotonin and your estrogen and everything just flows. It like you're just a bit more sparky. It's not a technical term, but when you're thinking of things like, and I get my clients to sort of just notice how they are day to day. And this is why I like a written tracker over a app, because there's only so much you can record on a digital app. Like, it guides you to say whether you're happy or sad. Well, actually, I haven't been sad all day and I haven't been happy all day.
Yeah.
Like, it's very linear. Whereas with a written tracker, you can really hone in on it, and there's a closer connection between you and what you're writing. And you can sit there. I've made it part of my nighttime routine. So get ready for bed, brush my teeth, head to bed, sit there, get my cycle tracker and go, right, reflect on today. how have I presented today? How have I been? What's been easy? What's been difficult? And you start to see a pattern.
Natalie, who I interviewed the other day for the International Podcast Day, she was saying that she has been tracking her energy levels, her creative energy levels. And she noticed there were definite patterns, but she also recognized that it was not linear in any way. Like it was quite diverse, in the patterns. But she said that now that she's done that, she has a really good sense of when to lean in, when to back away, when to rest. And also the self-talk has changed as well.
Yes.
Because she is not berating herself for not managing to pick up that ball and run with it or whatever. I'm speaking for myself personally. I am very hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing enough. I could be doing more. Starting to appreciate that actually I can't be sparky all the time. Sometimes I just need to watch TV and just zone out a little bit. And that doesn't mean I'm failing.
No, and I think one of my favourite phrases is nothing blooms all year round, so why should you? And I think was it Natalie you said her name was?
Yeah, Natalie.
She's really nailed the self-taught piece, and I think that was the big thing that improved my confidence and esteem was through the minute I realised I'm not the same, or I stopped trying to be the same day in, day out because I thought that's what I had to be. The minute I realised I'm not biologically built that way, the pressure I felt just went, because I was like, Amy, you can't get up day in, day out and be exactly the same. Certainly when you've got two biological systems, there is a lot going on. And how do you, those exact words are so key, like how do you know when to make the most of the situation? And when do you lean into it? When do you think I need to scale it back? When do you feel like, when you recognize those signs of step back, lean in, stop, change direction, whatever it is, recognize.
Sounds like a drama game.
Yeah, there's like trust, drop, pass the invisible ball, blindfold.
Blindfold.
Remember those trust games?
Now imagine a dinosaur's chasing you.
Yeah, all that stuff. But it's like when you recognize when you're at your best, then you can adapt to the times when you're different. And that's what I say to myself. I'm not worse. I'm not bad. I'm just different. And I know at the moment I've got an investigation at work, and can I come up with the questions I need to ask? And I'm just sat looking at a blank page, and I know sort of it had been a week earlier, I'd be firing at those because everything would just be easier. Whereas now I'm sort of like dragging myself through this script and this paperwork that I need to put together. And really what my brain wants to do is just sit and read and absorb.
We're missing something here. Like, we need to make sure that young people are informed.
We're only given a third of the picture, really. Maybe half at best. And I think what's missing is the cognitive, behavioural side of stuff. I remember, when I got my first period and being like, Mum, it's happened. And, she was wonderful, and she did what her mum did and sat me down, and we talked through different sanitary products I could use, and tampons if I want to be a bit more discreet, or I can use a pad, and she spent time with me, and it was lovely. Like, yeah. And I remember her saying, you might have a bit of pain, but nothing that a bit of paracetamol can't sort. But do no disrespect to my mum at all, but there was no conversation about how your hormones affect you. So you might be a little bit emotional before your period, or you'll see a fluctuation in how you feel, and how you feel is normal. It's not to shy away from it, but how do you how we need our young people now, and for generations to come, to learn to be empowered by it, not feel that you have to disregard it, step over it, pretend it's not happening,
Ignore it,
take a pill, push on regardless. And I think that's that really key word, boundaries. And I think there's a whole wider thing. I think schools are just getting better generally talking about romantic relationships and talking about boundaries there, and talking about consent. I mean, I didn't have that at school. So I know there's a lot happening in that space. So, which is good. We're hopefully having more
transparency.
transparency and understanding about what a romantic relationship is, what consent is, what boundaries are. So we've got individuals, growing up now with more skills and understanding to have potentially have a healthy relationship. But then there's just that added thing, if they're talking about that, then for women and those others that bleed, that identify as a woman, that how do they learn about boundaries for them as an individual? How do they work with it? How can it give them something rather than being taught that, you're only good 2 weeks in 4?
And also as well, for employers to understand how to better support their workforce, their employees, their colleagues. That is a huge conversation, I think, that needs to happen. Are you still in HR?
Still in HR.
Yeah.
I'm still mapping my way through what that conversation would look like. From a productivity perspective.
Yeah.
And I think really where I'm getting to with sort of the work and there's reading and stuff I'm doing in the background is finding moments. I mean, a business won't want to hear this, so it's very much on an individual level at the moment, but where I'm thinking about individuals and their roles, where do they get the autonomy? Because if they've got the autonomy, there's choice about how they do it and perhaps when they do it, within reason. Again, obviously, deadlines can't work when, being comfortable at work to be like, this isn't clicking for me right now.
And being honest.
And not necessarily having to communicate that, but how do you, I've thought things to myself like, because I track my cycle, I typically know when I'm going to be on. If I can, I'll push it to the following week. And if you think how many people say to you, oh, do you mind if we pick that up in a couple of weeks? And no one ever goes, oh, why is that? Why can't we do it tomorrow? Move it. Have that difficult meeting. If you think, oh, have I got to have a difficult conversation with my manager, or
yes,
I've got this really difficult case, or when you learn about your cycle and you learn where your strengths are, and I'd love to talk to Natalie at some point. She seems like on a wavelength, and it's that thing of like just working out when you're best when, and within reason, obviously within business needs, how do you adapt to that? And then how do you, again, it's the self-talk, then it comes down to confidence and feeling capable.
And having the vocabulary, the language to talk about it, I think that's also key. But also certain sectors are not going to be able to accommodate our needs. Like I'm thinking as a teacher.
Yeah.
But as individuals,
yeah,
we can be kind to ourselves.
Exactly. So that's what I was thinking as you were talking. It's, well, then how are you compassionate towards yourself to say, well, I've got to do this, but how do I? Well, you take a layer of stress and frustration off yourself if you just accept, I haven't got the energy, but I've got to get on the floor with these 5-year-olds and roll around and be like, this isn't the right time for me. But where you have, and we all, where we do have control, that's where we make the differences. You get to know yourself on a whole other level, which, changes the way you think about yourself, talk to yourself, look after yourself. That compassion word is so key. So many people I talk to, particularly women, unless men don't say it, but women particularly are really hard on themselves.
You know, creativity plays a huge role in the way that we look after ourselves.
Because the point is that you're being authentic. The point is that you're being aligned. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to feel a bit rubbish. I want women, or anyone that bleeds, to have such an easy ride of it and actually get to the end and go, I actually love my cycle. I love having my period.